Well, ladies and gentlemen, then this is the title of my presentation, Neuroscience of Ethics, the State of the Art and the Promises for the Future. Okay? The full article, it has been already published, it is in Ethics. I think that Itamar passed the link to read for you through email. Anyway, in the end of the presentation, I'm gonna give the link again for you. Well, it's widely known that neuroscience research can lead humankind to understand and combat many illnesses or conditions that cause untold suffering around the world, such as dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, or stress, and can also lead us to achieve considerable improvements in memory, learning abilities, executive functions, moods, and in many other areas related to cognition and emotion. Adnan Huskis, in this article, Neuroethics for the New Millennium, said that from the research on neuroscience has emerged a new area of knowledge, what we call the neuroethics. Huskis and them divide neuroethics in two areas, the ethics of neuroscience and the neuroscience of ethics. She then predicted that although the neuroscience of ethics was less developed than the ethics of neuroscience, it would be the area with truly profound implications for the way that ethics is approached in the 21st century and would blossom in the coming years. Then Huskis made this division between ethics of neuroscience and neuroscience of ethics. And we can define like this, the division. The ethics of neuroscience are the studies, what is morally allowed to do or not to do in neuroscience research. And in the neuroscience of ethics, it studies the neural mechanisms of ethical and unethical behavior. At that moment, Adnan Huskis said, well, this area, the ethics of neuroscience, when she wrote the article, was more developed. And then she predicted that actually, in the 21st century, the second area would develop more than the first one. And this is exactly what happened. Yeah? And I'm going to bring to you here all the literature review that I have done that, in a sense, shows that she was absolutely right. Well, in this presentation then, I will be focusing specifically on the research related to the neuroscience of ethics. The neuroscience of ethics is an area of neuroethics that's concerned with the understanding of the brain mechanisms that are involved in moral cognition and in our ethical or unethical decisions. And I propose here to expand this concept a little further, defining neuroscience of ethics as the field concerned to understanding of the brain mechanisms of all main behaviors that are related to ethics and morality. Then, what I will do, I will identify a set of neuroscience studies that have been published in the last 12 years and that are relevant for ethics, shedding light on behaviors such as altruism, generosity, self-confidence, trust, altruistic punishment, violence, lying, and prejudice. And all these behaviors, as you can see, are somehow connected to morality. I then discuss how the understanding of each one of these behaviors can benefit society and how we can use this research to help humankind to improve moral standards and promote general ethics. Then the first thing that we're going to discuss is mapping and stimulating the brain. Well, the technologies used in the research of the human brain are basically of two kinds. Yeah? For brain mapping, you have the fMRI, the famous fMRI, and PET, positive emission tomography. If for brain stimulation, you have the TMS, transmagnetic stimulation, and TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation. Well, what's the difference? Yeah? The main difference is that whereas brain imaging technologies measure the activation generated by the brain during cognitive processing, non-invasive brain stimulation induces changes in brain activation. Then when you see these pictures in general, yeah, when they have these images of fMRI, yeah, they are just, like images of the brain, of what's going on in the brain in a certain moment, and they measure the flux of blood in the brain, Then you have these techniques that are for mapping the brain. And there are other techniques that are related to the stimulation of the brain. We're going to see this, how these things work here. Well, the important thing is that these studies using fMRI, PET, TMS, and TDCS are starting to shed light on the brain mechanisms that underlie behavior related to moral and ethics. Well, then, mapping and stimulating the brain, self-interest, altruism, and altruistic punishment. Now starts the interesting part. Oh, in the field of altruism, many studies using PET and fMRI are helping to understand the brain mechanisms involving this behavior. In one of these studies, and this study here, the authors use PET to try to identify the neural basis of the altruistic punishment of defectors. Well, first I have to explain what's altruistic punishment. Altruistic punishment is actually when you punish the free riders, okay, the so-called free riders. Who are the free riders? Free riders are those people who present a kind of an opportunistic behavior. They are the people that they want to benefit for the cooperation in society, yeah, but they refuse to cooperate. Yeah? Then what people do? Sometimes people do exactly what you call altruistic punishment. They punish these people who are behaving in this way. They punish the opportunists. What's very good for the group, because if you punish them, they're gonna the behavior is gonna start to diminish. Yeah? But the question is, the problem is that the person who is punishing, who is making the punishment, is costly for this person. Yeah? Then the question is why people do this, why people do altruistic punishment, why people punish the free riders, yeah, if it's costly for themselves. Yeah? And then in this study they come up with an explanation. Yeah? They formulated the hypothesis that altruistic punishment provides relief or satisfaction to the punished, activating reward-related brain regions. Okay? Then their hypothesis is that actually, the punisher has some kind of pleasure, doing this. They found that the caudate plays a decisive role in altruistic punishment. According to the authors, caudate activation is particularly interesting because this brain region has been implicated in making decisions or taking actions that are motivated by anticipated reward, and the prominent role of the caudate in altruistic punishment was supported by the fact that those subjects who exhibit stronger caudate activation spend more money on punishing defectors. They then provide an explanation for this correlation, which is that the caudate activation reflects exactly the anticipated satisfaction from punishing defectors. Yeah? Then there is also then an explanation, for this behavior, the altruistic punishment. Then we have here the caudate nucleus within the skull, and in another study as well, involving altruistic punishment, the authors engaged, this is very interesting, this is a very interesting now. They engaged male and female volunteers in an economical game in which two players played fairly or unfairly, and then measured brain activities with fMRI, while the same volunteers observed the players receiving pain. Don't know if you understand the context. Two people, many people are playing, and other people are observing these people play, and these people are playing either fairly or unfairly, okay? And then they measure what's going on in the brains of those who are observing these people play. And what they found? They found that both sexes exhibited empathy-related activation in pain-related brain areas. It's towards fair players, okay? However, these empathy-related responses were significantly reduced in males when observing an unfair person receiving pain, only males. Okay? This effect was accompanied by increased activation in reward-related areas correlated with an expressed desire for revenge. They then concluded that in men, empathic responses are shaped by valuation of other people's social behavior, to such an extent that they empathize with fair opponents while favoring the physical punishment of unfair opponents. It's like in both sexes, they empathize with people that are receiving pain. They say, oh, poor people, they're receiving pain. But for the men, only for the men, when they see someone that's playing unfairly, it's like they say, you are doing this, then you deserve to receive pain. Then it's a different, in the behavior, in gender behavior in this case. In another study that might help us to understand the human reactions to perceive the unfair or cheating behavior, not in this article, uses TMS. TMS is, you remember, is a technique for stimulation of the brain. Then they use TMS in an ultimatum game study. Well, here I have to, to explain as well what is the ultimatum game. It's the favorite of Fabrizio. He can't understand it. He said, what?
No, I love the game.
You love the game.
You know what's my problem. We can argue about that.
Well, the game is an economic game. It's very interesting and it's used as well a lot in this kind of experiments. That actually you have two people, the one who makes the offers and the one that receives the offers, okay? Then, for the person who is making the offers, is given a certain amount of money. Let's suppose 10 reals, okay? From these 10 reals that I have, let's suppose, I can offer whatever I want from this money to the other person, okay? But the rule is the following. If the other person doesn't accept the offer, then none of us is going to gain anything. Well, then what happened? In general, in the Western countries, okay, there is different behaviors in small tribes, in Papua Guinea, they behave in a different way. But anyway, in Western countries, what is the general behavior, okay? If I offer 50%, if I offer 5 reals, for example, we don't have time. I always like to do this with the money in front of me. It's better to understand. And unfortunately, we don't have time now. But if you try this experiment, I suggest that you use the money because you see that. Then if you offer 5 reals, which is 50% of what I have, in general, people accept. 40% people accept as well. 30% people look like, but anyway, they accept. And less than this, people start not to accept the offers anymore. And then this is a very interesting thing as well. Because if 2 reals is always better than nothing, And then even so, people start to reject. Then it's an interesting experiment that they use to discuss what's the economical behavior of people, because why people in a certain moment they started to reject the money that it was always better off if you have 2 reals than to have nothing, And there are many theories that explain this, and but the majority of them say that this happened because, in a sense, you have a kind of a sense of fairness, And people say, oh, you are not being fair with me because you could give me more money, then, I'm gonna, in a sense, rebel against this, and I'm not gonna accept anyone, then you're not gonna earn anything anyway, okay? Well, but what's interesting here, they used in this experiment, okay, they use this technique for stimulation in the ultimatum gaming to show that the disruption of the right but not the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, DLPFC, by low-frequency repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation substantially reduce the subject's willingness to reject their partner's intentional unfair offers, which suggests that subjects are less able to resist the economic temptation to accept these offers. The question is, they still think that's unfair. They still think the offer is unfair, but they are more willing to accept the offer. This is what happened. Well, this implies that then after the disruption of the DLPFC, people tend to have a more self-interested behavior, give less importance in their actions to what is perceived as fair or unfair. They still think, oh, it's unfair, but even so, they tend to accept more the offers. Well, it suggests as well that future researchers could focus on stimulation instead of disruption of the DLPFC that could produce, this is an speculation, but more research has to be done, but could produce the opposite effect, i.e. it could increase instead of decrease people's susceptibilities to issues of fairness. And this study opens a huge door in the studies of acrasia, the weakness of will, and morality. Acrasia, as you know, is a discussion that comes since the ancient Greeks. That's a kind of a behavior that's been, very much discussed, in philosophy by Plato, by Aristotle, for the big philosophers. And in resuming, is the behavior that I know what I have to do, but I don't do what I know that I have to do. This is what we call acrasia, or the weakness of the will. I know that I have to do this, but I don't do what I have to do. It's related to morality. There's a friend of us, Dude, that she always gives an example, but she always gives. I want to get thinner, and then I know that I have to do a diet, but I can't do a diet. It's an example to understand, but actually it's related to morality, to this, And this is a big, one of the big discussions in philosophy. And the idea here is that this kind of experiments that are coming actually from neuroscience, they could shed light, on this kind of behavior that philosophy for a long time has been discussing. Then neuroscience actually, it's very important for philosophy. And this is the reason that we are involved in this with Nitamar and Norton, in this discussion with the group here of neuroscience. Because, neuroscience can shed light in many philosophical discussions. I want to just bring to you some, sample of this, what can be, done. Another thing, mapping and stimulate the brain. The question of prejudice. Well, in one of these studies on prejudice, the authors used fMRI to explore the neurosubstrates involved in the unconscious evaluation of black and white faces among black and white groups, particularly focusing on the amygdala cerebral, known to play a role in emotions and evaluation. The amygdala, the doctors present here, they know, is very well known to play a role in the emotion. Well, then in this study they found a correlation between the activation of amygdala with two indirect measures of race evaluation, but not with the direct expression of race attitudes, while these patterns were not observed in the evaluation of familiar black or white faces. These results show that the race difference correlate with different degrees of amygdala activation. In short, the study suggests that the white group presents more activation of the amygdala when evaluating black faces than when they evaluate white faces. But this difference is not present when the black faces are known to them. In the experiment, the region where there was more activation for negative evaluations was the left superior amygdala, a region of special interest according to the authors, as this is also activated when viewing faces that have frightened expressions. Then this is a very interesting thing, when they saw, for the white people, they saw faces of black people that they didn't know, the region that has activated is the same region that activates when they see faces, is another experiment very well known, of people who have, these terrible, expressions. And then, okay, yeah.
I just ask a question? There are many parameters here that I'm curious about because the tests seem so arbitrary.
The tests
seem very arbitrary in some sense.
In which sense?
For example, in this test,
yeah.
Isn't the reaction also predicated upon the aesthetic projection made onto the face? Meaning that if there's a face that has some type of stereotypical, classified, criminal look,
yeah.
and a face that
I see your point. I see your point. No, but there is,
doesn't this intervene in whether the face is known or
no. There is the control for this. Yeah, it's like there is the control for this. They didn't. I know what you mean. They didn't put what is known. Not that it is, but faces of ugly blacks against faces of beautiful white. Yeah, no. It's faces of, let me see, what is considered, it's all very relative, but what's considered, white, beautiful whites and comparable with the faces of, beautiful blacks. There is no, this element, you could influence, but no, there is the control for this.
And even then there would be the fear factor generated based on whether the face was known or unknown.
Sorry?
Whether the face was familiar or unfamiliar.
Oh yeah. And then what happened is that when white people, were evaluating faces of white people, the factor of being known or not being known wouldn't influence, But when they were evaluating black faces, the factor of to be unknown, actually generating the same kind of activation that generates when they see faces that are scary faces. This then is very definitive. Then because then if there is a kind of bias, then when you are white and you see the same phenomenon should happen when you see the white faces, yeah. Why when you see a white face that is scary, should actually activate the same that is unknown. Should activate the region that the same region that is activated when you see the scary, but this doesn't happen. Do you understand? Then there is the mediation of, and this is the this is okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Did they do the the opposite?
No, unfortunately they didn't do
Black men didn't evaluate?
Unfortunately they didn't do. Actually, unfortunately, I know if they do the blacks, evaluate and
the white faces.
I've been looking for, this guy because someone who probably did this, but I didn't, I think that would be very interesting if you could find, because exactly, because, please, would be, because, if it the reverse happens, then, then this would be very interesting, because actually you could say that, it's not just a question of prejudice, but it's a question of see the other group, like, exactly. Oh, if you could find, other, don't think, so, be interested in this.
I have a question, and kind of a provocation. Is this a study about prejudice or inclination to prejudice? Because it seems to me that the study is clearly about inclination to prejudice.
I don't think you
In which
can
sense?
measure prejudice, like, just
No, but
by that.
that
I
whether
think
or
it's
not,
an inclination.
yeah, you are whether
See the person different from the same person who
it's about whether or not you are inclined towards prejudice, but I'm not sure if it's actually an expression
How would you
of
measure
prejudice.
How-
Well, you
It's in the context of the United States where prejudice is just a euphemism for being racist.
Of course.
So prejudice already suggests an inclination to be racist.
Right.
but not
I'm
racist.
gonna answer to you. I'm gonna give a complete answer now in the next one. Just
Okay,
to,
cool.
just to I
I'm
think that-
curious about this.
Okay. I wanna tell you what I think. This was confirmed in another study, because we go on and then we come back to the subject. This was confirmed in another study using fMRI, where all participants disagreed with the prejudice statements and agreed with the non-prejudice statements, and reported having motivation to respond without bias. Yet, on average, participants showed automatic negative associations towards black relative to white blacks. This is the white faces. You know that in psychology, we have these tests that actually can measure if the levels of prejudice, they measure everything, the psychologists, they measure everything. And in this case, they measure prejudice. Then they make these questions, and then in these tests, it's like people say, no, I don't have any prejudice, I don't have any prejudice, no, okay, then, you're selected to participate in the experiment, and then you are participating in the experiment shows that actually you think that you don't have the prejudice,
So
but
if you
actually,
don't, I mean, your brain does.
Yeah, I kind of agree with her. I agree with you. No, but Let me just, I see your point. I see your point. Like naturally, you're saying that, if you don't express the prejudice, this is what you're saying, If in normal life, you don't express the prejudice, what's the point? who cares about the intimate life of your brain? I mean, I think that's...
But this is my point, and this is
Okay,
exactly,
cool.
That's morality. The fact that you might think, but you don't practice it.
Sorry?
No, it really gets to the morality point.
Right.
Or you think, but you don't practice.
No, but I think that there is another thing more serious than this, because actually, I think that if you actually have this inclination, it's much easier for you at some point to commit some kind of prejudice, you know what I mean? Because if you have this, it's so unconscious, or subconscious on you, at some point, this would, I think, could appear at any time. I think that this is the problem, because this is the way that prejudice works,
Right.
If you read the works of Alport, that made a huge study about prejudice, he said exactly this, that there is many degrees of prejudice, and it's something that's absolutely unconscious.
I know where you're going.
And then from this we go, to the discrimination, and it escalates until we go to discrimination, and even, he makes the relation with the
Nazi, what happened in the Nazis and everything. And I think that he's right, in this point I think that he's right. And this is the dangers in this kind of things, you know. Because subconscious, you have some kind of, you know, even if you don't know, but this is not one day what subconscious, you know, this will, you know, at some point show in attitudes that there would be, you know, this discrimination. This is the problem.
Cinara, do you want to go
It's the
ahead
way
before
that-
we engage you further? I
Yes.
don't know, because I don't want to delay your presentation, but I think that there is a danger on both sides, though.
On both sides.
Yeah, because it's kind of a Minority Report scenario. Have you read Minority Report by Isaac Asimov?
Yeah.
And then it became a movie too, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of that kind of scenario, isn't it? Because,
You predict.
yeah, you were thinking, you may predict inclination, but okay, fine, but what do we do with it? Is this the kind of scenario where because I know where you're going, and so I'm kind of anticipating, but is this enough, for example, to predicate our ability to provide therapy, for example, for people who are inclined towards prejudice? Just on the level of policy, for example. Is this enough? And I would claim, no, it's not enough at all to go that far. I mean, I'm always reminded of Dawkins here. I mean, we're all constantly acting against our mimetic impulses, and that's just what we call morality.
Yeah.
I mean, we all think, I mean, if I counted on my fingers the amount of times I had to hold myself not to kill a classmate,
This guy is done.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and I'm dangerous. Wow. This is kind of where I'm trying to go here, but we hold ourselves,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you were with
Yeah.
me in a scenario where,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
No, I wouldn't go that far. I think that it's just it would call a thing. I wouldn't go that far. You know that we have to, you know, put people, you know, against their will in therapies. I guess I really wouldn't go at this point. But what I think that's interesting and actually is dangerous and you know is very worrying is the fact that this kind of things, you know, happen. Because this is a problem with prejudice. People who study prejudice, they know, you know, the way that prejudice operates is very subliminal, you know. It's not people, they don't say that they're prejudiced and then, you know, even so, you know, they go and they end up acting out of their prejudice, you know. Then this could, you know, call attention for this kind of things that people say, oh no, you know, I'm not prejudiced with women, with gays, and with, you know, in the last kinds of prejudice, I think that's the third generation of prejudice. I think you have the third generation of rights, you have the third generation of prejudice, you know, against fat people, for example, you know. It's a kind of prejudice that, you know, people don't talk about this, you know, but it's happening all the time, you know. And then, you know, this is a problem. People say, oh, no, you know, you don't have any kind of prejudice with this, but in the end of the day, you know, you act in a prejudiced way, and this is very worrying. So
okay,
it's
just one question.
You know, sorry.
These studies, they indicate the middle is correlated with a frightening
Yeah, in this region, yeah.
region. Isn't a little bit stronger to say that we are seeing prejudice? Because I think Professor Norman was saying that you live in a cultural, ambience, that black faces sometimes are correlated with dangerous
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
And you are just responding
Oh, yeah.
to a frightening
That's,
situation
yeah.
because you are culturally oriented to that
Yeah.
indication.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's not a kind of prejudice.
No.
To be a prejudice, that has to be behaviorally stated.
Mhm.
So just identifying a part of the brain that is
Yeah.
correlated with a frightening feeling.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
to state the
Oh,
prejudice.
and I agree, I entirely agree with you, you know. The problem is the consequence of this, you know. For example, if you are a military police, a brigada, a brigada police, you know, and then you are searching for robbers, you know, people say, I don't have any data now of research, but people say that in general, if you are black, you have more probability of the police go for you than for the white. You know what I mean? Then even if it's not prejudice, I agree with you, even if it's not prejudice because people didn't act out of prejudice, but if you have this kind, of thoughts, you could, when you have the opportunity, this kind of things could happen, This is what I think that's the problem, and this is, with the brigade is typical. It's not only here in Rio Grande do Sul, around Brazil.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
All
everywhere.
over the world.
Yeah.
Is this a typical classical example?
Yeah. You know the problem, the dangers of this, Anyway, another, we can come back to the discussion of prejudice. I love the discussion of prejudice. I think that's one of the most interesting, in the field of psychology and philosophy.
Did you find any research that would relate the stereotype of the black thug guy? I mean, if you put those, okay, now this might sound a bit prejudiced, but it isn't.
Yeah.
So a black guy looks like a bad guy, and you feel fear and everything else. But what if you take those things that we think it might cause us fear? The way he looks, not only because he's black, but the clothes and all the way he acts. And you put that into a white guy.
Yeah.
And you put that image, would you feel the same way?
This changes. There is these people that are doing I think that the AIT they are doing this kind of research in America, that I think that you can access this through the internet. I can get the right, the right link for you, but I think that's AIT or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing exactly this kind of research.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's different?
and it's different. Yeah, it is
So it's-
different.
I mean,
And this is something very interesting that I think that you need more research on this. It's very interesting. Questions of class,
Yes.
they interfere. They definitely interfere in the way that you perceive, They definitely interfere because if you have someone that's I know what I mean, if you have someone that has a clothes that and you put in this interferes, they have in this case, definitely, and you can see even without research, without experiment, you can see this, I was reading, it's a very common sense, but anyway, this there were. Marta Medeiros or David. I don't remember if Marta Medeiros or David. David. And they were saying, I think that was David that said that he reported a friend of his. And this is something that I always said, and now I think that people are starting to realize this. A friend of his, a woman that said the real prejudice in Brazil is not a prejudice against race, it's a prejudice of class. And she said, if I marry, she said to him, if I marry with a black man that is rich, nobody's going to say anything. But if I marry with a taxi driver, the world is going to come. And it's right. At least in Brazil, it's right. The class prejudice is more stronger, I think, than any other kind of prejudice. And in this case, it is
white. Even if you're poor but you're white, it's not that. I mean,
it's not
bad.
that.
Being black and being poor.
It's right. It's an addition of things. It's an addition of things. But I tend to agree with these things. I think that in general, the big prejudice in Brazil is a class prejudice, is against, poor, unfortunate, And I don't know if it's cross-cultural, it happens in other, but I think that here in Brazil, definitely.
Cinara, is the analysis here focusing on the nature of prejudice? Because another accompanying question of mine would be, prejudice is not necessarily linked to fear.
Linked to?
Fear.
Oh, yeah.
Prejudice is a state of mind.
No,
right?
no.
It's simply labeling that
yeah.
guy, because I mean, we could take another control situation.
Yeah.
You have one guy who's just an ordinary black guy,
Yeah.
let's say, if we're working on this prejudice factor,
Yeah.
and then you have someone like LeBron James, like
Yeah.
7 feet tall,
Oh, yeah.
Very
superhuman
Oh, yeah.
guy.
Oh, yeah.
No, I just mean physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that the fear provoked, in fact, has nothing to do with his skin color, but with his size.
Oh yeah, baby, yeah. They
And
could,
he happens to be black.
oh yeah. This research that
And
I
then
said
the
was
other-
particularly on the discussion of the way that we evaluate, blackface. But yeah, probably, if you,
Because
if you put,
necessarily
if you make the,
prejudice would be reacting
haven't
to
been-
perhaps
I
a
know.
very big human being.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on the other hand, you would be prejudiced not based on any type of fear you feel
Yeah.
from the figure, but simply a labeling that, oh, well, that's whatever.
Yeah.
That's a stereotype, that corresponds
Oh,
to
yeah.
a stereotype of
of
what I should
Yeah.
not like.
Yeah. In this research that I mentioned to you, I'm going to find that they do this kind of cross, and they do with fat people, and they do with I don't remember the others, but definitely with people that are considered fat.
So prejudice is not necessarily linked to fear.
No. What I did, I present one experiment that they can see this correlation, But this doesn't mean that all the prejudice are connected with fear, It's just one case, one particular case, And the study, wasn't only about prejudice. They were evaluating this kind of things, this kind of behavior, But was not only about prejudice. But you can actually use the study to discuss prejudice. This is the intention, yeah. But you're right, maybe the causes of prejudice. I think that the best, explanation for the cause of prejudice are still the explanation of the classical that is, Alport, in the history. Well, another important and interesting point is detecting lies and telling the truth. At the moment, there is no reliable technology to detect lies, despite the fact that in the United States, defense-related agencies have dedicated significant funds to the development of new lie detection strategies for eventual use in criminal and terrorist investigations. Okay? You have no idea, people, of how much Americans are investing in this kind of technologies, And you really have no idea because they are not publishing the results, because the results are top secret, Then if you go to, in general, in researches, normal research, you go in the papers, in the journals, and you see, you can do, here is this, and that. But this kind of research, they are not publishing in the papers. Then they really have no idea, but the people say that really they are investing, a lot in this. Well, Ellis and Greeley, however, make a call for regulation of the use of the lie detection technology in court and trials, claiming that it's necessary to prevent the use of unreliable technologies and to develop fully detailed information about the limits of accuracy of even reliable lie detection. They criticize any attempt to apply this research to the real world without more research being carried out. And research is already being developed. In one of these studies, the authors concluded that it's implausible to think that there is a single and simple deception network to be discovered. Instead, it's likely that the deceptive behavior results from a systematic combination of cognitive processes. In one of these experiments, the authors used TDCS in order to manipulate the production of deceptive responses, and they found evidence that focal changes in the excitability of the human brain can experimentally influence lie production, altering the speed and efficiency of lying responses. It's another case that they use the techniques of stimulation. In this experiment, the authors tested two kinds of lies: denying the fact that really happened and producing a false response about an event that did not happen. And they found that the two types of lies
tested responded differentially to stimulation delivered over the DLPFC, which suggests that the two kinds of lies have a distinct neural mechanism. Then the mechanisms of lies, they are very complex, and it's different if you deny that something happened and if you create a lie, invent that something happened. It all seems to suggest that even if it's true that at the moment we don't have a 100% reliable technology for detecting lies, the advance of research in this field will inevitably lead to this, even though it's impossible to predict when. The advent of a reliable lie detection technology can have a huge impact on law and security. If the technology starts to be accepted as evidence in court, or even as an instrument to be used by police in interrogations, we will certainly have a much more fair criminal justice system, with the offenders being punished and avoiding forever innocent being jailed for crimes that they haven't committed. But this could be a wonderful new world in terms of justice, but there are some important ethical and juridical questions that would emerge, such as, and these are questions, and now coming back to the ethics of neuroscience. Do states have the right to invade our brain? It's one question. Do people have the right to refuse to be submitted to tests to detect whether or not they are alive? This is another very interesting question. What's more important? To preserve the freedom that individuals have of keeping the secrets of their minds, or guarantee that innocent people will not be unfairly condemned? Here, I would say the following. I think, particularly, that's more important to guarantee that innocent people will not going to be in jail. But again, I can say this in Brazil, when we have a moderately well-established democracy, and in countries where you have, democratic countries. But you imagine in a dictatorship, if this kind of technology, is used for a dictator, what he could do, with this kind of thing. That is a huge, and important discussion in ethics of neuroscience, because definitely, even if now at the moment you don't have a reliable technology, soon this is going to be available. Tamara, look at me because of the time. How long do I have? Because,
We're supposed to finish at 11:30, but you can wrap up in
5 minutes then, and I'm going to tell, skip some things. I'm going to just talk about serotonin, that I think that's interesting. And then, serotonin is a neurotransmitter whose deficiency has for a long time been associated with depression, and also to irritability and aggression in primates and humans. It was found that rhesus monkeys with low CSF serotonin metabolite levels show more spontaneous aggression toward others of the same species, receive more wounds, and die at a younger age than other rhesus. The effects of low serotonin on monkeys can be devastating in terms of their survival and social interactions. Well, if that's so in monkeys, how would be these effects on humans? Krakowski, in this study there, states that the relationship between serotonin and violence in men has been established in multiple studies. He carried out an intensive review of the literature in this field and found that extensive literature dating back to the 60s provides evidence of an association between animal aggression and reduced serotonergic function. Serotonergic function was a marker and predictor of both violence and suicide in various populations. He points out, however, that not all aggressive behavior was associated with decreased serotonin function. This is very important, because people say, oh, it's all the aggressive behavior. No, it's just maladaptive behavior, These aggressive behaviors were often maladaptive in some ways, whether impulsive, emotionally driven, or socially dysfunctional. impulse control, emotional regulation, and social functioning appear to be important qualifiers of the violent behavior associated with serotonin dysfunction. The authors in this study conclude that there is a complex relationship between serotonin and aggression, with various factors contributing. They point out that serotonin influences psychological and social factors, and, on his turn, psychological and social factors influence serotonin. It's like a double way, road. Well, I'm gonna, fill in finance. There is lots to be said, but I'm gonna skip them, because of our time, We arrived at the discussion of the oxytocin. That's very interesting as well. There are many studies on oxytocin, that oxytocin actually can increase the self-confidence of people, and there is ethical questions related to this, because people could exploit actually, these kind of things, if you're more self-confident, and especially the studies related, they say that oxytocin increase not only self-confidence, but increase trust in other people, and this is the dangers, They have lots of studies that were, I brought to you here, but, I'm not gonna discuss, when actually, people, the oxytocin has this effect, of improve the trust that you have in other people. And then the problem with this is that people could, use this against you, It's a very serious ethical problem, And the other discussion with oxytocin, is if oxytocin is actually involved in the mechanisms of generosity, altruism, and greediness, There are also many studies that say that oxytocin can actually improve generosity, but recent studies are actually contradicting this and saying that the oxytocin actually improves the moral behavior inside the group, but not outside the group. Then you became more, generous with people that are part from your group, but this doesn't make you more generous with people that are outsiders, let's say. And then there is a big discussion actually, and there is research being done about what is exactly the role of oxytocin in the moral behavior, I'm gonna have to pass because that's our time, But then, the discussion that we have is oxytocin the substance of morality? There is lots of discussions about this. There is the studies of Pozak that has been here last year, in this. What's the name of this?
Frontiers of thought.
Yeah, and he talked about this, he studies, but not only this. There are many people studying this.
Also, Patricia Churchland's book.
Oh yeah.
Neurotrust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, well, Anyway, then to conclude, the future of ethics and the ethics of the future. All these studies show an important path for the studies of morality and the lack of morality, and attitudes connected to morality such as selfishness, altruism, prejudice, fair play, and punishment. We are now starting to understand what the brain's mechanisms connected to these behaviors are, even though it seems we are still in the Stone Age in terms of what is now known. The future is, however, extremely promising. The scenario where we could induce a more moral and cooperative behavior in people through brain stimulation or even pharmaceuticals is still a long way off. That's what you call the moral enhancement. This is a subject for another, should be a subject for another talk, It's a big discussion about this. And it also raises moral questions in itself, such as whether or not it's morally permissible for us to morally enhance ourselves by any means. However, there is no doubt that if you do understand the neural process underpinning moral-related behaviors, it could help us not only to understand better how people make moral decisions and act morally, but it could also be used in future to benefit people who want to act in more altruistic, friendly, generous, reliable, and tolerant ways, but don't know how to do it. To conclude then, I will say that the door is open for neuroscience of ethics to lead us along a path that is highly promising for the studies of ethics, morality, and all the behaviors related to it. Neuroscience of ethics has arrived to stay, and if you want a better future, improving the moral standards of humankind and building a world where people live longer and better, being more and more free, happier, and more ethical, it's time to pay attention to it. Thank you very much. Here is the link for the article, you know. I couldn't talk, you know, everything that, you know, I would like to say because we have, you know, it's almost finished. I already passed, But if if you are interested, you know, if you are interested, you can actually access the, you know, the article.
It's a shame we have lower attendance than usual today, because this is something that we could do, for example, in the afternoon and have discussion about this, you know, about these questions of moral enhancement, because it's such a rich topic. And I mean, I would be up for it if more people were. We can talk about that after class, but I think that my first question to you, Cinara, is the question of oxytocin. One of the problems of oxy is that it's such a difficult substance to have a chemical equilibrium on. I mean, right now in the United States, oxytocin is the most problematic drug. I mean, it's more problematic than cocaine in terms of public health because of the amount of people that have been given oxytocin as a medicine and as an opioid is just a big, big issue. And that brings the question of...
What are they giving it for?
Depression, they call it social anxiety. I think it's the fashionable pathology now. I have social anxiety, I cannot relate to people, then they give you oxy. And they give you like candy in some places, and it's problematic because it's creating the zombie. Like, I mean, Courtney Love was on oxy. That gives you almost all the information you need about the chemical. I think that brings an interesting question about undesired consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a problem when we're playing with this. In a way, I agree with you that it's almost like a vaccine, right? In a way, it's almost like a vaccine, right? So we take vaccines so we don't develop polio because we all agree that polio sucks. So we all agree that violence sucks. Why shouldn't we take medicine that makes us less violent? It would be okay if we had the causality not to infer undesirable consequences with playing with this. I don't know how you would tackle that issue.
Yeah, it's the principle, the bioethical principle of precaution, that should be respected actually in any research, you know. You cannot start to give drugs for people without, these drugs to be tested.
But how do we experiment with oxy? That's the thing though. Wow. How do we experiment with it? How do we even reach the level in which we have a chemical balance which is acceptable?
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem, it seems to me, because you are going to be, from a utilitarian point of view, you're going to be inflicting a whole lot of damage in the process of reaching a chemical balance. So how do you get there? I don't know if you would have, because that's the thing. Oh yeah, there's a whole lot of potential on that. Sure, how do we get to the safe point?
But doesn't this happen with different medications as well? I mean, once we start using neuropharmacology for different, like Prozac, just to get the name of the most famous, and so forth. You have all kinds of pills for different treatments, and most of them, not only they have side effects and collateral damage associated with the medication itself, but also undesirable effects that will be more like on a social basis, the way, I think of people with deficit of attention.
Yeah.
Ritalin.
Yeah,
right?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
they
it's a
use Ritalin.
typical,
It's a typical,
situation where kids are having real problem, in the same way you talk about the oxytocin pills.
Yeah.
Kids that have been addicted to Ritalin.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
problem for
It's-
most families that have to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, this is not to say that it's not, acceptable or even important to deal with this through biotechnological means, let's say, by resorting to, all
I-
the...
I don't want to touch the Ritalin issue with kids because I think it's very, very complex and there are matters of consent in the middle.
Yeah. But the
But
Ritalin-
if we're talking about the adults and
Yeah.
taking a medicine and going to a shrink and deciding that you want to, hey, use as many pills as you can. Sure, you're an adult, you should be able to take this decision, and then you should be able to deal with the consequences of this decision. It's fine by me. But that doesn't seem to be, though, if I am taking you seriously, that doesn't seem to be your point. Your
No,
point
no,
seems
no,
to be a
no.
little bit more radical. I mean, you're almost like implying that we should research this so we could develop eventually a moral vaccine, which theoretically I am all for it. I'm just not sure how we get there.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a moral vaccine.
Yeah, I
you
don't
know,
think
but
it's-
it's-
you
yeah,
can
I
get
don't
to
think
this
that
point,
this
though.
is that. Yeah. Well, what I want to do here is to bring the issues and even the ethical issues, that are raised by the development of technology. In the case of Ritalin, for example, there is an ethical issue that's a big discussion, and the use of Ritalin in adults. Because there is a problem that's the following. They say that if you don't have the deficit, people, are using in America, especially in America, probably here in Brazil, they start in universities to
Right.
increase their
To be more
performance in
competitive and
tests. Yeah.
performance, right.
Then the ethical question is, well, someone who uses Ritalin and actually is improve your cognitive abilities, could be competing, for a post or for a position, with someone that's not using. And then, is this a kind of doping, because in sports you cannot use a substance that's going to improve your performance, Then the question is, would be, this allowed, in the intellectual life? Then there is, enormous issues, that I think that we don't still have the answers, but
Well, I think
they
that
will
you're
have
going to
the-
come to a point where you're going to have, like a handbook with all the answers to, moral enhancement or
Yeah.
self-enhancement.
Yeah.
I, at least as far as I'm concerned, in terms of thinking of this, just the way Fabricio raised the problem, I think it seems to be the idea that, we have this back and forth, let's say, reflective equilibrium
Yeah.
or whatever kind of situation where people are going to be, revisiting
Oh, yeah.
their own self-perception, self-understandings about
Yeah.
what you want to be like in
Yeah.
society in terms of being more competitive or etc. And I don't see how in terms of thinking by way of analogy, how is this so much more different than being able to function normally? Let's say
Yeah.
someone that's using drugs against epilepsy,
Oh, yeah.
and all different kinds of things. Now you think, oh well, in this situation, of course, medication is okay.
Yeah.
Well, some people, I'm thinking, especially Fabricio, as you mentioned, shrinks. I'm thinking of the challenge for psychiatrists. The other day I came across an article by two colleagues. I'm not going to give their names. Excellent scientists that we have here in the medical school. You guys know them. Psychiatrists and neurologists. And I was interested that the two of them writing this article together, they even recognize that psychiatrists are more open to subjectivity and somehow they are more subjective oriented in their analysis as opposed to neurologists. This was a very interesting claim coming from scientists.
Oh, yeah,
These are not
yeah.
philosophers. These guys are scientists, they don't care for philosophy at all.
It's
But I
interesting,
found
yeah.
it very interesting because this is precisely the point. The question that bothers us as philosophers is to think of consequences in terms, for instance, of social functioning, social control. These are typical questions for philosophers. For someone that's doing the experiment more like a neurologist or even more a neuropharmacological researcher, he or she is more thinking in terms of cause and effect
Oh, yeah.
results, right? this pill is going to cause such and such kind of effects. Of course, there are several side effects and collateral damage probabilities. Are they desirable? Or still worth taking the risk, etc.
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So
But
I think that what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
that the social,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
complicated, complex features for social relationships,
Yeah.
this is something that society itself has to deal with.
Has to
But I
deal
don't think
with
it's going to
it,
come
yeah.
up with some kind of regulation. I hope not.
Yeah.
Workers' Party is going to
Yeah.
decide, well, now here we have the norm, and we have
Yeah.
A, B, and
But-
T norms for writing.
but
But
what's
we do have
interesting is
norms
that-
for vaccines, though. I mean,
Yeah.
we, that's
In
the
terms of a public policy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the personal decision whether
but
this
it's,
is the pill, is it available in a, I'm gonna be, hooked up to this kind of stuff and making this, my life better or less miserable. It's like people deciding to drink or to
Yeah.
do some
Yeah.
stuff, even though
Yeah, but
they
there
know
is
the
one
effects of
particular.
smoking or,
Yeah.
taking drugs, etc.
Yeah,
but there is one distinction.
there
You don't
is-
choose whether or not you take the
Yeah.
vaccine for polio. If you have a kid and you don't take him to
I
take the
see your
vaccine,
point.
you're going to
If-
get arrested.
Yeah, if
it's
not-
danger of contagion.
All right,
It's a
but
crime.
Fabrice,
Yeah.
if this comes
Yeah,
to the
but-
point of being part of a social policy,
Yeah.
resulting in a legislation relating to public health,
Yes.
right? Decision
But
making.
from what
Yeah.
Cinara
But
gave us,
yeah.
I don't see how that is not the conclusion, the logical conclusion. That's my point. I don't see how we could not present the problem of violence on the same level of the problem of polio.
I don't think it has to come this way because
That's-
even Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, this was already the problem in these utopian, dystopian
Oh yeah, yeah.
thought experiments already at the beginning of the
Yeah.
century, or Timothy Leary saying, well, how about having some
LSD.
LSD?
Yeah.
Yeah,
In the-
We're
but I
using
think,
LSD for
I think
alcoholism
that,
and heroin
we're going
addiction.
too far. I think that
Yeah,
the
you're going too
important
far. I don't
thing,
think we
yeah,
have to.
That's
the
my job.
important thing, yeah, the
Going too far is
important
what we
thing
do.
now, I think that at the moment, the important thing now,
That's what philosophers
is to
do.
realize that there are causes, there are biochemical causes for some kinds of behaviors,
Right.
and then, it's time for us to start to discuss this kind of things, and not
Right.
to avoid, oh no, it's only social causes that cause the violent behavior. What's not true, Then I think that this is an important part, to rescue the role of, biology and, biochemical in the social behavior, And you cannot go to the other extreme that say, everything is biology or genetics, and the other extreme is
Right.
everything is social. No, there is a happy middle term here, and I think that, this is the point.
Yeah, and
You had a question,
Yeah.
sorry, because you had the,
No, I had to know, I don't know.
No,
You were thinking about the question, okay?
Because what I was thinking of these two colleagues, and they are, they work at the Brain Institute, is precisely that when you get a neurologist and psychiatrist to do a paper together, it's precisely trying to combine both approaches.
Yeah, I
to
think
see
that this is the way,
Yeah,
This is the-
I found this very interesting to see that they were even claiming this together,
Oh.
the two of them.
Pass to us the article.
As a psychiatrist, I can see, and especially that the psychiatrists recognize
Yeah.
that psychiatry is more open towards a subjectivity than someone doing the neuropharmaca, frankly.
Have you got the
person,
article?
no, but this is the point here. For us, as philosophers, when we do philosophy of science, the chemical formula, has nothing to do with the way you're going to use it for good or evil.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's objective.
Oh, yeah.
that's
Sure.
That's all I
Yeah, but the way that we are going to use it for good or evil, this is a philosophical problem.
Right,
Then we have,
right.
then we have the philosophical
Right, but
problem.
I'm saying this because
Yeah.
we have a big school of pharmacy here.
Yeah.
And these guys, they are doing medications and pharmaceuticals. They don't, they're not thinking that this is going to be
Oh, yeah.
used for.
Oh, yeah.
These two
yeah,
colleagues of ours from the Brain Institute recognize that perhaps philosophy has a place to a role to play.
This would be interested as well. No, this is a good
Become
question.
skeptical about it.
This is a wonderful question, yeah.
Reductionist debate between themselves about which is more subjective or less subjective,
Yeah, so they call
Yeah.
philosophers to arbitrate, right?
Yeah. This is
you're
a
gonna be the rep.
good.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't.
This is a good
That's the
question,
thing.
actually.
No, they don't. But
Yeah.
but I would say that as far as I know, the PUC-RS structure, the Pontifical Catholic University here, they are committed to this humanistic mission of the university, meaning that you're supposed to take philosophy as a core course for all different areas, including engineering, technological, and health sciences. That's their view of university mission, right? So even for I know where you are aiming at, and I understand your
observation.
your remarks, but I think that the Brain Institute is quite open to this interlocution. So much is the case that they invited us from philosophy department to do this cooperative joint venture in terms of a dialogue. But I agree that not all neuroscientists are interested in ethics of neuroscience. And by the same token, not all ethicists or people doing meta-ethics are necessarily or eventually interested in neuroscience. So I think it's both ways that you have limitations. I think in our group here, we're really trying to have more interaction and to have an integrated view of neuroscientific contributions and philosophical, ethical contributions